And this recording will go up on our YouTube channel. All right, let me introduce our speaker this evening. Brett Moyer, PhD, has had a lifelong interest in birds and nature. He currently teaches biology and environmental science classes at the Bowles School and co-owns Bluebird Pharmacy and Spa with his wife. He maintains a local Nature RX series on Facebook and Instagram. The handle is @Bluebird Pharmacy, that introduces followers to birds, wildflowers, and other interesting species of Northeast Florida. And let me tell you, just a personal note from me, I truly enjoy his series. I learned so much from those posts. Since 2016, he has established and monitored eastern bluebird nest boxes at sites across Duval and St. Johns County that have produced over 500 baby birds, which is awesome. So Dr. Moyer, go ahead and with your presentation when you're ready.
All right, thank you. And if everyone could please mute, I think we might have one or two people that haven't muted. Great. All right, and everyone can hear me all right? Okay. Well, I am a science teacher at the Bowles School, and I like to get students out in nature where possible. And in my environmental science class, for instance, I have them learn the 75 noticeable birds of Jacksonville throughout the year. And we have some quizzes throughout and a few bird walks. And in addition to that, I help my wife out with Bluebird Pharmacy, and she puts me to work in a variety of ways. I've been a bird watcher for quite some time, and I used to be very serious. I'm still pretty serious, but I used to monitor the life list and keep up to date on all that. I haven't updated the life list in a few weeks, well, a few years probably, but I do love getting out in a lot of different ways. We'll be talking about the eastern bluebird, the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. If you haven't gotten to know them, they are a tremendous resource in so many different ways. Their data helps to visualize so many things about different species. And you see that the eastern bluebird is with us in Northeast Florida throughout the year. And if you go out in some of the places like Julington, Durban Nature Preserve, you see bluebirds in the wild. It's not just in the backyard. They do like a variety of habitats that have these open areas with not too much high ground cover. And another local place, 12-mile conservation swamp near Palencia. I saw this guy exploring this snag and then looked inside, and I went around the other side and saw that there was a hole there. And this was in the non-breeding season, so I suspect he was just checking that out for future reference. And there he was up top. Handsome. I've only been in Jacksonville for 10 years, and a lot has changed. I know that there's sure to be some lifelong Jacksonville residents here, and you've seen more change than me. But part of the motivation for helping out the bluebirds is because all of this changed. So I've highlighted a certain section of Jacksonville. And if you haven't explored Google Earth Engine, it is a very cool resource. So here is Julington Durban Nature Preserve. And here is St. Johns County Fruit Cove in 1984, when I was a freshman in high school. And look how things have changed. And this will go up through 2020. And in the last, if you've driven around northern St. Johns County in the last couple of years that aren't illustrated here, there's been continued changed. So much of that native habitat that's open is being converted, or fire is being suppressed. So there is a need to help out the bluebirds. And I haven't been doing all that long as far as immersed with bluebirds. Here's a historical timeline showing that, yeah, I saw some advertisement for the Florida Bluebird Society annual meeting, and I decided to go. And my wife and I were here listening to a presentation by Bill Pennywell on how to attract bluebirds. And I was intrigued enough. As a teacher, I knew that I was on a campus with good habitat. I had seen a few bluebirds, not too many, but I saw the potential. So I wrote a grant for the Florida Bluebird Society, and I laid out some potential nest box locations and gave some thought about how many bluebirds that campus could support. And then I had members of the Florida Bluebird Society come out. We scouted the locations. They were kind enough to give me some money to get the program started. And I am not as good as I should be with thank you notes, but I made sure to write one for them. And the carpentry shop is much better with woodworking than I am. So they looked at the plans of the Florida Bluebird Society website and whipped some up for me out of cedar. I put them up. If you've been on the Bowles campus along San Jose, it is a wonderful view. I wondered if the bluebirds would also like it. And fortunately, the next day, I was walking around just explaining this project to one of the PR people at Bowles, and we think, well, I don't know, it might be a month or two. We'll see if they come by, and then boom, flash of blue. And we got this photo, and I was excited for sure. And that first year, we did all right. 26 fledglings, proof of principle, and we decided to go bigger the next year. And we are covering half a dozen locations now. One of them is the middle school of the Bowles School. Also, great open habitat, lots of potential. And I had some students in my environmental science class that helped out to install those boxes. The Ponte Vedra campus of the Bowles School, lots of potential next to a big golf course. We had some students help with that too. And then a couple parks in San Marco. The San Marco Preservation Society pitched in some money, and the Bowles Environmental Club pitched in some money. And here's the Environmental Club helping to put up some of these boxes. And then Palencia Elementary, we had a donor that sponsored a box. We put one up there. So in the background, my wife was wanting to start her dream of opening a pharmacy, and my contribution was the name, Bluebird Pharmacy, a few other things. And there she is, and in the background, you can see that I was selling Bluebird nest boxes. Just to whet your appetite, I have some photos that I've taken over the years. And here's the male and the female posing. This is at the Ponte Vedra campus. This male was doing all sorts of things to make sure his plumage was looking extra special. And here's one from last year, a little behavior that was intriguing. So males don't build the nest, but this guy seems to be wanting to entice some female to get started. And he was looking particularly dapper with that plumage. In many cases, a female is interested and starts the nest building process. Here you see how quickly it progresses. Pretty good work. And I had some assistant with technology several years ago that added another perspective. Here's a view of the nest construction process. I think I was envisioning the female weaves the nest with her bill somehow, but you see that it's more of a foot shuffle process. And that's what she does over the a week and a half, 2 weeks that she's constructing the nest. Lovely egg color. And sometimes the female, I will tap the side of the nest box to alert the female, and almost always she will fly out of the box if she's in the box, but occasionally I'm surprised that she is still there. And this was a case. Hatching day, always exciting. Feed me. Getting bigger. Food coming. 8-year-old nestlings. And those of you that have bluebird boxes in the backyard will appreciate when they have nestlings, they are just going back and forth to the box, both males and females. Here we are at day 12. After about day 12, I don't open the nest box anymore, so I don't have premature fledgling. But check out this, and then check out in the upper corner here, the removal of the fecal sac. So dirty diaper patrol. A particularly juicy morsel. And watch up here. All right, keep that nest clean. And it's not just a few caterpillars. I was surprised to see that frogs and lizards are part, and this is a matchup. I took this photo and then I opened the box. So that parent was feeding this age nestling. That's a pretty big bite, but they grow so quickly. They do need a lot of protein. And then you see they're getting very close to fledging there with their speckles. And then when they leave, you might mistake them for some other species, but that's the juvenile bluebird. And then that awkward transition time when they're getting their adult plumage. In the nest boxes, we have other species that are welcome. These native species I have no problem with at all. And they've nested there, Carolina chickadee and tufted titmouse. You see the difference in the nest construction. You can tell at a glance when you open up the nest box that you've got something different there. This male is encouraging a bunch of juveniles. These are all youngsters that fledged that year at the Bartram campus, presumably in our nest boxes, and they are doing a big root bath. It was particularly dry, so this was an area where the sprinkler, I think, had accumulated some water. So they were having a good time. Checking the box is an important part of the process, as we'll discuss. Here, this young man is using a mechanic's mirror, so a mirror on the end of a pole, so you can look upward and see down into the nest. And then we have some future ornithologists here checking out. There weren't any eggs in the nest, but there was a nest that was being constructed, so they got a glance at that without disturbing any little guys. So here's a visual showing over the past 6 years now. We've been able to produce a bunch of fledglings. And I enter the data each week in the Nest Watch for the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, and somebody somewhere is using those data. Here's just a screenshot from the first year I was doing this. I was a bit eager and checking every 2 or 3 days. I just do every week nowadays, just partly because of the time involved for a couple dozen nests. And one other interesting research in vineyards showing that the bluebirds do help to control pest insects. So they're not just pretty things. They have some utility, some ecosystem services. All right, a few details. If you are interested in this, I'm going to go through some of these topics, but there are probably 50 different things you need to keep in mind. These are just some of the top. One is the entrance hole. You do not want the hole too big because other species like the European starling can access the box if the hole is too big. Also, the construction of the box, the dimensions are important. In Florida, it's good to have a extra wide roof. We've got blazing sunshine and intense rain, so it helps to have a little more protection. Ventilation holes is also important for the heat of the Florida summer. Light color, you don't want it too dark, like the one in the bottom right. That might be fine for a northern state, but in Florida, that may get too hot, and cedar is preferable. Here's a pine nest box I put up, and it did not hold up that well. So cedar, if you have a choice, go for the cedar. It might be a few bucks more, but I would recommend it. You can make your own box if you're handy. Go to the Florida Bluebird Society, and you can download the plans. Some woodpeckers can be a little pesky. And here's one of my boxes that was damaged by a woodpecker. So putting on a metal ring at the entrance is worth doing. Where to put it? I mentioned the heat of Florida. I actually like to, if there's a huge oak, I don't mind putting it under there as long as it's a big oak and there's no branch within 10 feet or so to allow a predator to access, a snake or a cat or something like that. But out in the open, the predator guard is an important, a key component, I think. And I like the stovepipe predator guard. It has served me very well. I am unaware of any predation in any of my boxes because I have invested in these very large predator guards, and they swing. So if a cat or a raccoon tries to get up, they are baffled, hence the name. Here are some images from others to show that the type of predation pressure that we want to avoid having for our bluebirds. If you invest so much time and energy, you do not want to be that person that your babies are just about to fledge and then a predator gets them. I have seen many Facebook posts on various bluebird sites, people quite sad, in tears, and They didn't put any predator guards up, and they said, well, snakes have never been a problem. They aren't a problem until. So don't skip that step, is my recommendation. And go big. So the small baffles might be good, prevent a squirrel or something from coming up and getting seed, but the raccoons or some other things, they might chuckle at something this size. So go big. I have experienced that the ungalvanized doesn't hold up as well as I would like. So when I am putting in new poles, I'm only using galvanized at this point, and it's holding up a little more. I put platinum here just to remind you of the trade-off. If you go for ungalvanized steel, it's going to be cheaper. If you go for galvanized or something else, it may be a little more expensive, but I think it's worth it. Tending the yard. Bluebirds collect insects to feed to their babies. So if you use large amounts of insecticide in your yard to keep the yard looking nice, there may be some trade-offs there. So I would encourage you, particularly during the breeding season, to not use a huge amount. And if you haven't read this book, it's definitely worth it to see what you can do with your yard to make it more inviting for a variety of species. Also, cats can be a problem. On the Bowles Middle School campus, one year, I couldn't understand how I had awesome nest boxes and everything seemed to be wonderful habitat, and I just wasn't getting that much interest. And then I noticed as I was checking every week that, hey, there were cumulatively 3 cats that somebody was feeding, and I had spoken to somebody in the kitchen saying, maybe not feed them so that they come all the time. And then I think one of the cats was one of the boarders, or I'm not sure, but the next year, no cats, and that was one of my best sites. So that's an anecdote of sorts, but I think there's a clear relationship. The cats will negatively affect your bluebirds if they are prowling around. And especially if the fledgling just leaves the nest and is awkward and not flying strong, they are quite vulnerable. You need to check the boxes weekly. It's very easy to get excited, put up a Bluebird box, take a picture of it, put it on social media. Yes, I am helping things out, and then never check it. And that can actually be a disservice. So you want to be invested and check things weekly to make sure everything's going okay. The nest boxes should be up about now so that the birds are checking them out and know that they're there. I knock on the side of the nest box before I open it up I usually take the cell phone, the flash is off, and I open up the nest box and then just do a quick photo, and then I'll go home and sort all the photos and data. Some things that can be problematic, fire ants, you got to keep an eye out for those. I have not had huge problems with those, but if I see them, I'll sprinkle some diatomaceous earth if they're too close to the box. But I have heard some bluebird landlords who have lost the entire nest because the fire ants went up and did bad things. Paper wasps, if I see these, I will remove the nest and I will coat the top of the box, the underside of the roof with soap. That seems to do a good job. House sparrows, not a good friend to bluebirds. I have not posted some gruesome photos of house sparrows that went in and killed bluebirds or their nestlings, but we don't want to be helping these guys out too much. They're not native. And if I see, fortunately, I haven't had any house sparrows trying to nest in my particular boxes here, but if I see a house sparrow starting to nest, I will remove that nest. And you see that in the view of many, It's better not to put up a box at all if you're going to help this particular species out too much, because you're not going to be helping the bluebirds. Another reason not to just put up the box and forget about it. Here, I noticed, I mentioned there was some issue with the ungalvanized rust. Well, this was before the season started, and we went out just to check everything was okay. And no, it wasn't okay. It had snapped at the rusted joint, so we had to fix that one. And last year, a little drama, I went to check the box, and then, right here, starting to lean, and this was a rusted joint, and I open up the box, and not a good time because they just hatched that day. So I went to the hardware store, and I think I gave them a few questions that they never had before. So they walked me through what to do, and I got a pipe repair clamp. I'd never used one of those before, and we secured that, and that allowed us to get through the season. And then just last month, we went in and put a whole new galvanized pole set. I try to be very attentive to the bluebirds, but sometimes, are they trying to tell me something? This was at one of the campuses, and I'm not sure if he's happy. He should be. He's getting pretty good at attention, but we do our best. And my niece checking out the bluebird, she helped me check a few boxes. I get a lot of nature therapy from visiting the boxes. Allow me to say a few things about Bluebird Pharmacy. There's my wife, and here she is in the compounding lab. We're a compounding pharmacy, so she can whip up medication from scratch into various formulas. If you have a dog that can't swallow a pill, we can make medicated treats. If a child doesn't want to swallow a pill, we can make lollipops with the medication. We have various supplements. We give a lot of COVID tests these days, COVID vaccines, friendly delivery drivers. And we even have a mini spa using non-toxic products. I, on Instagram and Facebook, sprinkle in a good number of local nature RX posts. So check that out at Bluebird Pharmacy. For instance, throughout the bluebird nesting season, I will post some updates. I'll go out on the trail, check things for 4 or 5 hours, sort some photos, and then give an update. Some folks like that. And I'll occasionally post on a variety of other topics, black skimmers, and I've gotten into trying to identify the numbered leg bands, and there is interesting stories on many of these species. Just this morning, I saw 3 banded piping plovers, and I'm in the process of figuring out their stories, and I'm going to have a post in a couple days on where they're from. It looks like Michigan and New Jersey, but we're narrowing it down. And then I went to Master's Track after somebody had pointed out that there was a cave swallow down there, and I was very fortunate to get some good photos. My mom and I went to southern Florida to explore the swamps, and we saw some cool flowers. Here's some other native flowers. If you haven't gotten into wildflowers, you got to check it out because there's some beautiful stuff out there. So many people have assisted me at various stages. So many thanks to them. And here are a few other resources. I tried to pack in just the highlights. You might check out some of these others. And at this time, I'm happy to answer some questions. And I know there's some other bluebirders on the call. So you're welcome to chime in with your perspective too.
Well, we had a couple of questions kind of early on in the chat. So let me go ahead and go through those. Someone asked whether dried mealworms are as good as live mealworms for attracting wrens and bluebirds.
I at most of my boxes, well, I haven't used mealworms for a couple years, but that's just because I've been quite busy. I did use dry mealworms in my backyard for a couple years, prudently, here and there, and they definitely like them. Live mealworms, I think, are more expensive, but I would guess that they are going to be better. I would think they might be more nutritious, but I might say too many dried mealworms to me might be like maybe too many potato chips. You don't want to give just that. I think they benefit from a variety of foods, different caterpillars, frog, wizards, whatever. So mealworms, I'd say go for it, but don't overdo it, perhaps.
Cool. Let's see. Mark says that his granddaughter and he put up a bluebird nest box in the woods near where they live in south of Nashville, Tennessee. They do have snow on the ground right now, but do you know when they might expect to see some bluebirds nesting in near Nashville, Tennessee?
I would think late February into March, things would get going. But even in the winter, the boxes can be pretty important, I think, up north, because they can use them as roosting. And I've seen a few incredible shots of somebody open up the bluebird nest box on a very cold night, and there were multiple bluebirds in there huddling, keeping warm. So getting that up early enough, even though they might not nest for a couple months, having that there as a protective roosting spot is something to keep in mind.
Very cool. Mark also noted that the Audubon Society is partnering with Lowe's or Home Depot. I think he wasn't quite sure, and selling bluebird nest boxes. And he says that's an easy to build kit. So that's another source. Jeff asked,
and I might just interject there.
Sure.
Be sure to get, in my opinion, be sure to get the predator guard. It's easy to get the kit box and just nail it to a fence post or something like that. But that box is vulnerable to snakes, raccoons, cats, etc. So don't skip that extra step of getting predator protection.
Very cool. Jeff asks whether you've noticed any success with the entry door using different locations, different orientations to the sun. Is there a best orientation that you know about?
I don't think that is there are other variables that I have higher in my checklist of where to put things. For instance, James was kind enough to mention sometimes you think you've got the perfect layout, everything looks good, and it might be facing east and all that, but the sprinkler, when it goes off each day, might shoot right in that hole. So be sure to run the sprinkler once or twice whenever you put your nest box wherever you think it's going to go, to make sure that isn't going to be an issue. But yeah, I would position it so you can see the birds well, and I wouldn't worry about the particular direction, especially if you have a nice wide roof that's going to shade from any sun.
Andrew is asking, when do they start nesting in Jacksonville? He says he has a box ready, just needs to find the right place to put it.
Yeah, well, the Florida Bluebird Society sent out an email just within the past week. There's one person already has a half-built nest. So this is early, but if they're not building now, they're definitely looking around. So you want to make sure that thing's up in the next week or two, for sure, so that they don't notice your neighbor's yard instead of yours first.
Cool. Joan is asking, when planning landscaping, are there any plants that are best for bluebirds, either for attracting insects or berries or other food that they might like? Do you have any recommendations along those lines?
Well, I would say yes, there would definitely be, but this is, I've started to be able to identify some native wildflowers, but my knowledge base there is limited. So there are other people that could better answer that. But absolutely, if you have a plant that is going to be attracting caterpillars and other things, it's going to be a nice resource. And at the Bowles School, we have a lot of these big oaks. And I notice when they're doing feeding runs, they're not sitting on top of the box or the fence, going down to the grass and then coming back up with some insect. And I know that the school needs to use insecticide and things like that. There are always trade-offs, but the Bowles School has these huge oaks, and I notice they are coming from the various oaks and they're gleaning caterpillars from all these old trees. So you would be surprised at how much insect food is out there in the right habitat.
Very cool. Heather asks if you sell the box, pole, and predator guards, predator baffles at Bluebird Pharmacy.
You know, I did for the past several years. This year has been crazy busy with coronavirus testing and all that, and with the supply chain issues. The price has gone up for the brand that I use that's galvanized. I would say that if someone is interested in creating a trail with 10 or so, I've supplied some for the St. John's Audubon and a few other people that have set up big trails. You know, I'd be willing to place a big order, but I got to place an order and they come on pallets because the poles are 5 feet long, solid, that I like. And I learned that it's very expensive to ship those because 5 foot is apparently just beyond the threshold at UPS where the price goes way up. So I sent a few to my brother, and I think I paid as much in shipping as I did for the actual pole and nest box.
Debbie says that she posted a photo of eggs in her nest box on Facebook, and she was virulently attacked by people saying what a horrible person she was to disturb them. But obviously youth seem to think it's okay, you know, to open it up and take a picture of them. No one came to her support. What's your advice for, you know, making sure that you're doing it carefully?
Well, the nestlings, well, the eggs, it takes about 14 days from laying for the eggs to hatch, and then 17 days for the youngsters to get old enough to fledge. So as I mentioned before, about 12 days or so, I stop opening the nest box because the youngsters could get scared and fledge early. But I have had no problems checking with the eggs and the youngsters. I do it very quickly, less than a minute. It's just open it up and my flash is off on the phone. That's something to keep in mind. Make sure your flash is off. I take a quick photo and then I'm on my way. And I just look at it big picture. I am doing a lot for the birds. I'm providing them this resource. I'm making sure trouble isn't reaching them. So overall, I'm helping them out, and I don't think there's any problem. And I'll say that one time at Bowles, I went to check the nest box, and the birds were about ready to hatch the eggs, and there were about 15 people digging some big ditch. They're putting in internet or something like that. And I was very stressed because thinking, oh my gosh, this is disturbance. And I couldn't stop that because that was $1 million job. But a couple weeks later, after several days of disturbance, and the birds were feeding the youngsters throughout all this disturbance here and there. And all those youngsters fledged just fine. So that was an eye-opener to me. Like, wow, these are pretty resilient birds. They are used to humans. That's part of the reason I picked bluebirds, because they quite happily will use campus habitat with we have hundreds and hundreds of students on campus walking by things. So I would not worry as long as you keep things brief. And I've heard maybe not visit the nest in the early morning when the female might be most likely to be laying the egg, but just think big picture. You're helping them out, and you are spreading the joy to other people.
She also says that she has multiple birds that seem to be checking out the box that she has up. She's wondering that if she can add another box, and how far apart should the boxes be?
Yeah, well, it depends on the quality of the habitat, but I wouldn't put them closer than like 150, over 100 yards for sure. So if you've got a small yard, no, you're not gonna, you might get a chickadee or something, but it's gonna be tough to get a second bluebird unless you have a big enough yard to spread things out. And if I threw out some of these numbers and they're going in one ear out the other with all the information overload, go to Cialis.org, excellent site. You type in a search and you can find all these details of how far apart they should be and what the predator protection should be, all that.
Okay, well, Jen asks whether you have any comments on the plastic nest boxes.
So the recycled milk jugs or whatever. I showed one in the presentation that was a dark color, so definitely not the dark versions of those. And I personally, I would think that maybe the cedar or natural wood might be more breathable and not get as hot, but I'd have to do a little search online to see if somebody's done a test like that. I will say that it's probably more durable because even the cedar, after 5-6 years, it can be showing some wear and tear. I'm just a little biased. I like the natural woods myself, but if it's not too dark colored, you'll probably be okay. And it has a wide roof and ventilation holes, all those features. I bet the recycled plastic would be a durable and useful box.
Elizabeth asks if there's a nest in the box from last year, should it be removed?
Yes, I went around last month and removed all the old nests. And part of the reason I do that is just so when I go out in a couple weeks or so, whenever I start checking, I will know that if there's anything in the box, it is new that year, and that'll help my monitoring. Now, some people are quite careful, and at the end of the season, they will, with dilute bleach, carefully wipe everything down. That's not going to hurt. Yeah, I will remove it at the end of the season. I do not remove it. The bluebirds can nest 3 times. Even in some places, I've heard 4 broods a year. But in Northeast Florida, it's just 2 or 3. I do not remove the nest between the broods. They will, what I've observed is they'll just put a fresh layer of grass there or pine needles and will nest right away. And that way I don't have to worry about causing problems to them. I don't know if I pull it out and I might disturb something she's just about to lay. So some people feel strongly about removing the nest in between. I personally do not, and I've been able to fledge 590 fledglings over some years. So overall, I think it's doing okay with that strategy.
Cool. Helen asks if there are multiple Bluebird boxes in a neighborhood, does that have an effect on the success of a new Bluebird box? that might
Well,
be added?
if you draw a map and where you're planning to put a Bluebird box in your yard is within 150 yards of your neighbor, then you need to go to your neighbor's house under cover of darkness and remove. No, I'm kidding. That will be an issue. If your neighbor has Bluebirds and you look over the fence and they're happy, you will probably not have success in your yards. Or if you do attract your neighbor's Bluebirds, then you're going to have an upset neighbor. So yes, too high a density might be an issue.
Amy says, or is asking, what is the best snake guard for boxes that are attached to wooden fences? Or are there any ways to deter snakes on the ground?
So it's on a fence post or something?
On a wooden fence, yeah. If you attach the box onto a wooden fence, so you've got a flat surface that it's attached to. Is there, what kind of snake guard can you use for
They
that?
do make some predator baffles for 4x4 fence posts. Personally, I would not want my box nailed to a wooden wall or a fence post without a predator guard. I would get a pole, but I would recommend going to Cialis.org and seeing if they have some sort of predator protection for that. But I would, because if it's a fence, then you have all sorts of access points for a snake or cats and raccoons. So that just makes me nervous. I would say you still got a couple of weeks. I would do it where you have better protection from predators.
Okay. James asks, when's the earliest that you have known Bluebird hatchlings to fledge? He says he knows of 5 hatchlings that disappeared after 5 days with no sign of predation. Could they have fledged after 5 days?
5 days, that's too early. Something was up there. I'm not sure what it would be. Yeah, and that's another thing. If you are going to be a Bluebird landlord, you've got to brace yourself for occasional disappointment. No matter what you do, something's going to happen. You didn't think of something, and you might have an unsuccessful result. Maybe all the eggs don't hatch, and maybe, despite your best efforts, a predator gets them. So be ready for that. But the flip side is, look big picture. Those 2 Bluebirds, for you to help the population, they in their lifetime only have to replace their numbers. So if they have 3 total offspring that are successful, then the population's going to go up. And they nest sometimes 3 broods a year for multiple years. So that could be 15 birds, nestlings, they're cranking out each year for multiple years. So there are not Bluebirds everywhere. So that means that it's a tough world out there. And a lot of Bluebirds don't make it. So some people get very attached to the Bluebirds, and it's devastating if there is an occasional loss. It happens. Focus on the positive. Overall, you're helping out the population.
Amen to that. Jeff wants to know if you have any students who are becoming interested in conservation, like I assume careers in conservation, as a part of this type of thing.
Well, who knows what is the tipping point. I just try to expose them in class. I can go off on all sorts of tangents talking about nature, show some photos and walk around campus, bird watching, seeing the Bluebirds. And yes, some go into conservation. Now, they might have done that without exposure to me at all. We'll see. I just do what I can. And if one or two get into it, excellent.
That's right. One can only hope. That's all the questions I see in the chat. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Moyer? You can go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask it verbally if you want to, or you can put it in the chat, either way. Nope, doesn't seem, I think that's all the questions. Jeff says thanks. And thanks so much to you for coming and talking about bluebirds. It was really interesting. Really appreciate all your expertise and sharing that with everybody. And thanks to everybody for attending this evening. This was really wonderful. Any other questions or comments from anyone? I'm just getting some really nice compliments in the chat. Fun and informative. Thank you. It's so helpful. Great session. Thanks so much. So it was real good. So with that, I think I'll say goodnight to everyone. And thank you again for being here. And thank you, Dr. Moyer, for presenting this. It was wonderful.
All right. Good luck, everybody.
All right. Take care. Good night, everyone.
Good night.